The American Constitution set the stage for an ongoing debate about what our democracy should be. There's no better way to honor that spirit than a conversation about Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, which is the case we'll be discussing tonight. The seeds of this case were sowed 100 years ago when the United States faced many of the problems that might seem familiar to us today. There was unrest in Europe and the Middle East. At home, the gap between the richest and the poorest Americans was widening, and corporations were spending an enormous amount of money to exert their political influence to maintain their monopoly power. But a group of reformers, led by President Theodore Roosevelt, was able to minimize corporate influence in our political process by banning direct corporate contributions to political candidates. While this law has withstood the test of time, you still meet people every single day who feel that the deck is stacked against you and me at the expense of corporations and lobbyists. Folks are feeling the way they did 100 years ago. We're beginning to lose faith in the American bargain that if you work hard and follow the rules, you're going to have a shot at success. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. There's no reason to feel pessimistic because the students in this room are going to solve our challenges the way that Theodore Roosevelt and his progressive-era reformers solved theirs. Now, the Citizens United case started 7 years ago. Senator Hillary Clinton was the front runner to be president of the United States. She was beating Senator Barack Obama in the polls for the Democratic nomination. She was inevitable. She was definitely going to win. A nonprofit called Citizens United wanted to air a documentary called Hillary the Movie that was highly critical of Senator Clinton. But unfortunately for Citizens United, there was a law on the books that prohibited corporations from engaging in what they called electioneering communications. This meant that corporations could not pay independently for an advertisement to be placed on TV or on the radio or in a newspaper that supported or opposed a political candidate. So the Supreme Court was posed a very simple question: was Hillary the Movie, the documentary, an electioneering communication? But as they examined this question, the issues became way more broad and way more fundamental. We all know that the First Amendment of our Constitution guarantees us the right to free speech, but questions remain. Does the First Amendment give us the right to free speech in all contexts, unlimited? Do corporations enjoy the same free speech rights that individuals do? And should the First Amendment allow equal access to freedom of speech? These very questions cut to the heart of our Constitution and our democracy. Now, there are those who believe that the prohibition on electioneering communications by corporations abridged their free speech. It was censorship.
This amendment would give Congress the constitutional authority to ban movies, to ban books, and to ban organizations such as the NAACP from speaking about politics.
Now, there are others who believe that corporate influence in politics is inherently corruptive and therefore should be regulated by the government.
We have a broken system that gives more power to the wealthy and drowns out the voices of most regular voters. This isn't what our founders intended when they crafted our democracy.
The Supreme Court ultimately held in Citizens United versus the FEC that corporations can spend as much money supporting or opposing political candidates anytime they want, so long as that spending is independent. They can't coordinate with campaigns, they still can't write checks to campaigns. But there is an old adage that money in politics is like water on pavement, and that it will find its way into every crack and crevice. Think about that, because it's true. Tonight, we will be discussing Citizens United versus the FEC. We will be discussing how the government, whether the government should be regulating the flow of money into our political elections. And we won't walk out of that door with the answers. We'll actually walk out of that door with more questions than we walked in with. And that is the genius of the American Constitution.
I ask that you now take your copy of the Pocket Constitution you have on the table and turn it to page 1. Together, will you read with me? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Chris has a passion for inquiry, a foremost specialist in the Socratic method. He reminds us that we ought to ask questions, not about any chance question, as Socrates put it in Plato's Republic, but about the way one should live. He encourages us to roll up our mental sleeves, turn on our childlike questioning lenses, and become our own best thinkers, askers, and doers. I give you Chris Phillips.
How are y'all doing? Are you ready to constitutionalize? Did I invent that word? Oh, that's cool. How many people have already taken part in a Constitution Café with me? Oh, wow. See, that's why San Antonio feels like a second home. That is lovely. Well, it's always such a thrill and an honor to be back. When I started gallivanting across the fruited plain holding these sort of mini constitutional conventions with motley groups of Americans, places from the Mall of America to People's Park in Berkeley to a high school in a very dangerous area in Washington, D.C. My idea was that in an era of such deep polarization and intolerance, that maybe the Constitution itself, even if and as we differ on how it's interpreted, can be a means, a foundational means for bringing us together. And that premise of mine has more than fulfilled itself. After all these years, I still get such a thrill from engaging and sort of helping to be a spark for these types of activities. By immersing ourselves in various facets of the Constitution, we also come to learn more about ourselves and our place in this country and what we might want it still to be and what our role can possibly be. Any sort of foundational inquiry, I think we always sort of ask and answer more and more of those questions of questions. Who am I? And who can I still become? The reason I love to get together with young people, and even though I have lots of degrees in formal education that can sort of maybe be put up as wallpaper or something like that, the reason I like to do these is for selfish reasons in many cases, because I learned so much from you, from your beautiful hearts and minds and your wonderful ways of filtering experience through whatever these questions are. I learn a great deal from you, so it's always such a great pleasure to have this opportunity to be part of a discourse like this. So now let's talk about a little bit more about Citizens United. There's certainly not a whole lot more that I can add to T.J. May's wonderful synopsis in these two great letters that were written from opposing points of views by the two senators. But it's not just a case. Citizens United is about a long history that began in a country long, long ago in a time far, far away. And it's not just a case, but a story. And it's the story of the power of money in politics. And that's what it really boils down to. So Citizens United, it's a very innocuous sounding name, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. Citizens United, as TJ explained, was a nonprofit corporation that planned to air a documentary. It didn't even consider what it was doing, a campaign commercial. It was called Hillary, the movie. And it was just going to air on cable video on demand. How many people have you ever even bought anything on cable video on demand? Exactly. That's my point. Maybe, yeah. So a very small percentage. But the Federal Election Commission nonetheless said that it was a no-no, that it wasn't just a documentary. Why? This was an issue advertisement, as they call it. And that was banned, that unions and corporations were prohibited from coming out with these issue advertisements within the short 30-day window of any campaign in a federal election. Now, this was argued before the Supreme Court, and there was a very narrow ruling. It was very divisive. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote for the majority of 5, and in striking down this ruling that you could not air any sort of political commercial within 30 days, he used a very lofty rhetoric in saying that This law undermined, it wasn't just about campaign financing or even about campaign financing principally, but that it undermined freedom of speech in the area of campaign finance. That's how he framed the issue. In his ruling, and he used very lofty rhetoric, Justice Kennedy wrote, "Speech is an essential mechanism of democracy, for it is the means to hold officials accountable to the people. The right of the citizens to inquire, to speak, to hear, and to use information to reach consensus is a precondition to enlightened self-government and a necessary means to protect it." He didn't stop there. He then went on to say, "The court has recognized that First Amendment protection extends to corporations." And indeed, it has in many cases. Since 1886, the court has ruled that political speech, above all forms of speech, couldn't be muzzled. And so Kennedy went on to write, "The censorship that we now confront, in this case of Citizens United versus the FEC, is vast in its reach. The government has muffled the voices that best represent the most significant segments of the economy. And as a result, the electorate has been deprived of information, knowledge, and opinion vital to its function. By suppressing the speech of manifold corporations," Justice Kennedy wrote, "both for-profit and nonprofit, the government prevents their voices and viewpoints from reaching the public and advising voters on which persons or entities are hostile to their interests." So in his view, it was especially important that they be able to air these things in that 30-day window before elections. He concluded his long written decision by saying, "If the First Amendment has any force, it prohibits Congress from fining or jailing citizens or associations of citizens, such as corporations, for simply engaging in political speech." So to him, it all boiled down to freedom of political speech. So that was the ruling, and that majority won, and he wrote his ruling reflected that 5-person majority. Now there's a minority of 4. There's a justice named John Paul Stevens. Anybody heard of him? He recently retired. I had the pleasure of meeting him recently at the National Constitution Center. He was just a little bit, almost 90 years old at the time, and he wrote a blistering 90-page dissent. 90 pages. It takes me years to write 90 pages. He had, it was the longest dissent he'd ever written in his entire career over the course of decades. Justice Stevens countered that the court's decision to do away with limits on political speech by corporations wasn't at all censorship, and so it didn't at all amount to the banning of free speech. Here's what Justice Stevens said in chastising the majority. "The framers of our Constitution took it as a given that corporations could be comprehensively regulated in the service of the public welfare. They had little trouble distinguishing corporations from human beings. And when they constitutionalized," see, I didn't invent that term, "when they constitutionalized the right to free speech in the First Amendment, it was the free speech of," and he underlined, "individual Americans that they had in mind." Besides that, Justice Kennedy noted, the government does regulate free speech. He goes on to say, "The government routinely places special restrictions on the speech rights of students, prisoners, members of the armed forces, foreigners, and its own employees with the federal government." So to Justice Stevens, the court's majority ruling amounted, in his view, to a rejection of the common sense of the American people, who have recognized, as he put it, a need to prevent corporations from undermining self-government since the founding of our country, and who have fought against the distinctive corrupting influence of corporate electioneering. And he closed by saying, "You know, it's a strange time to repudiate that common sense of the American people." So my question to you is this: do corporations have the same First Amendment rights to free speech as individual Americans? That's my question. Do corporations have the same First Amendment rights to free speech as individual Americans? Now, you can feel free to look in any of these sections or not look at all of them. You might want to take a look at the First Amendment. You might want to take a look at the 14th Amendment, the so-called Equal Protection Clause. And in Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution, in Clause 3 and Clause 18, there's these two clauses called the Commerce Clause and the Necessary and Proper Clause, which gives Congress expansive powers, or what they've taken to be expansive powers, to regulate corporations and other forms of business and interstate and interstate activities at every turn. So you might want to just take a gander at these things as you consider this question. Do corporations have the same First Amendment rights to free speech as individual Americans?
I think that money talks, and the way I see it is that corporation, they have more money than individuals with their ideas, so.
It's true. Anyone who has more money can buy things from people and kind of, what's the word? What's that word? Bribing them. And a lot of corporations that I've read in an article, I forgot which article it was, but it said that corporations would fund for a political person, and it would kind of mean like an IOU.
I do think that the government should have some, governance, legislation over corporations and how much they can give to campaign contributions, give to candidates. But then my next question is, how do we regulate that whenever it comes to censorship? And then what are we opening the door to? What are we opening Pandora's box where now we can't have a documentary about, a situation that occurred in Washington, or something scandalous, or something that should be brought to the attention of the American public?
Corporations do not represent a person, and the spirit of the Constitution was that freedom of speech to the individual person was the intent, from my interpretation.
From Plymouth Colony to the first colony in Virginia, where I'm from, well, they were started with corporate charters that were granted from the King of England. And in other words, our country is founded on that tradition of having a corporate charter. And one of the primary grievances in the Declaration of Independence was that King George is no longer honoring our charters. So if you look at almost any town or city or any kind of group or entity of any kind, it was founded on one kind or another of a corporate charter, and actually made me start thinking about this in very different ways, because I tend to have this tendency these days, corporations bad, individual Americans good. And so now for me, the boundaries are a little more blurred, to the point where I'm not so sure.
Corporations, like I think of them as the big ones, and not in the way you were thinking of them as the, corporations started the charters for those particular cities. So, but then even then, they were trying to govern the citizens of that of that particular time. So they had their own rules that they set up, and they were affecting all of the people that were there. So now the corporations that we think of are big. They have lots of people, and they are affecting other people by their products or services that they provide. So I'm not sure either. So
you asked, does the Constitution indicate that a corporation has the same rights of speech as an individual? And I would say in that case, no.
I see a connection with saying we the people and thinking of corporations as individuals, because they're run by the people. So, but it's difficult because with government, in Congress and in all the Senates, there are corruption and there's corrupt people. And so if governments, in a sense, run corporations, and corporations vote for politicians, the politician could be also corrupt in a way and could destroy our government systems as well.
Wow. Wow. So now it's time to sort of report back and tell us what sort of insights you arrived at.
Hello, I'm Paris Williams from East Central High School, and I'm a junior. I kind of agree with Shin said, because yes, money is like, I guess, getting corrupt people, but I believe that a rich man's words are just as wise as a poor man's. So shouldn't a poor man be allowed as the same opportunities as a rich man?
It's like saying, like, I represent you, so I'm going to pay you so you can represent me. So whatever I'm advertising, I'm going to pay you to represent my product or anything like that.
There's hands up over here. Want to make sure we hear all these wonderful voices.
Hi, I'm Gerry Bradley. I'm a junior at the East Central High School. Something that caught my attention, Senator Ted Cruz, when he mentioned Fahrenheit 451 Democrats. I had to read that for the summer assignment. Something that brought to my attention, when you read about it, the government is telling people what jobs they need to do, and if they don't do it, they go to jail. And one thing I love is when you read books, you read about our history. So if you read books, you determine what either happens in the future or prevents what happens in the past. And basically, but if we get a president that says we have to ban certain books, we're basically not learning about history.
Hello, I'm Imogen Henderson. I go to Legacy. I'm in 7th grade. Our group talked about how so much money can go, and there's really no person telling you or is making your decision, and you don't know who you can trust, who is going to make the final decision. You don't know, so it's kind of hard to decide who you can trust, or it's hard just to decide political-wise or who runs what. So basically, how can we trust anyone if we don't know the truth?
Hi, I'm Elijah De La Fuentes. I'm a sophomore at East Central High School. I wanted to add on to what she said. Like this Tuesday, actually, my class did a simulation of the Roman Empire, and they kind of had a democracy too. So in our simulation, there were senators and we're provincial leaders, and there was like the army and all that stuff. So like we had the emperors, who in now time would be, I guess, the president. And in our simulation, there was a lot of like backroom deals, like in order to overthrow the emperor, and like none of like the other factions, like the senators and all that stuff. Nobody knew like what deals were going around to the other factions, only to what we knew. So I guess, she's right. Like there's a lot of suspicions that go on in politics because nobody knows who's getting the better deal. And as they said before, like money is like what runs the government. So if they're getting more money, or if they're going to give us more money, then we're going to want to support them. And yeah.
Hi, I'm Devin Devin Maldonado. I'm a freshman at East Central High School. What our group talked about is limitations and kind of like putting a cap over what can happen and what cannot. But the one thing I want to hit is social voting, because the citizens are voting, but we really don't know what we're voting for, because all we hear is the president is this and the president is that, but we really don't know background information about them. So the society is kind of voting blindly without actually knowing on what they did and how are they doing it. We also don't know why they're running for president. And society also likes to sit in bed a lot. that means we take in what little information we know and we just go from there instead of going into more information about what's happening and what's going on. So that's what gets out there.
Hello, I am Jessica McNally, a senior at East Central High School, and I am the Skills USA District 11 Vice President. Going back to the question that Mr. Phillips asked earlier, do corporations have the same rights to free speech as individual Americans? If we look at the First Amendment of the Constitution, it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, if we look at that, it says right of the people. Now, I have a question. Does the people mean only individuals, or does the people mean any person that is an American, whether it is the corporation or whether it is just an individual's voice?
That's the same question we asked ourselves right at the very end, and it certainly changed the context in which we examined the question. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Mark Reyes. I am a high school graduate from East Central, and I'm currently enrolled at Zack. I feel that, going off of what Jessica said, is a corporation the same as a person or considered in the same group as people? I think considering going off of what the Supreme Court said about money being the same as speech, I think if that's true, and some may disagree whether or not it is true, if that is true, then does that mean that the corporations have more speech than I do as a person, or even a group of people, just because they're a corporation? If you get a corporation that is about 2,000 people, and then you get 2,000 people, are they equal? I don't know for sure if a corporation should count, but I do not feel that they are equal. I don't know if they're the same, but are they equal? No.
We'll come to you right after this. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Fantasia Gonzalez. I'm a junior at East Central, and I'm the avid historian. Going off of what Shin said, and kind of Mark, people in corporations are kind of corrupt because they get investors, and you're not too sure if the investors or the CEO are telling them what to do, if that makes any sense. So they can probably be voting for somebody else, but then the CEO's oh no, vote for that person. So they have to go and do that so they won't lose the investors or lose their jobs probably. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah. These are wonderful, fascinating questions. And then there's, as we talked about, there's so many kinds of corporations, from for-profit to nonprofit to lots of things in between. Thank you so much. Yes.
My name is Sydney Dudley, and I'm an 8th grader at Heritage Middle School. And what our group was kind of talking about was maybe they should regulate the amount of spending or amount of money that corporations should have, so that we can kind of, people who maybe don't have that much money can give their voice, and not only people who can make it rain every day. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Liza, and I go to Legacy Middle School, and I'm an 8th grader. A great point that a fellow avid student, my friend Brioni, made was, and we discussed here as well, is that many companies and billionaires that can contribute lots of funding to the political candidates that want to run, is that they could just be using their political candidate as a puppet, so they can just dictate whatever decisions they want to be made and kind of push it towards what they say to all the rest of us as they go and give their speeches as they come around to whatever they speak. That's it.
Anybody over here? Let me come over to you.
Hi, I'm Jared Shanklin. I'm an 8th grader at Legacy Middle School. And my group brought up a question, and going back to what Liza said, that billionaires can corrupt the campaigns. So if somebody is a write-in candidate, how do they get funding for their campaigns?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christopher Twist. I'm currently a 7th grader at Legacy Middle School, and I'm an Avid. I think that companies, like during a political campaign, companies are using it as leverage to start their company, and I think it's a source of like capitalism where companies try to help and give and contribute money to these campaigns so they can advertise their own company in a way. So it's basically like a deal that the politician has with the company, that the company can, there's a deal where they can advertise them and they can give money for them to have the funds to create whatever they need for the campaign, and that's it.
Hi, I'm Tyler Simbera. I'm an 8th grader from Heritage Middle School, and I just wanted to hit that they were trying to 49 Democrats were trying to sign a law to say that they could ban books and movies and other things so we couldn't talk about politics. And as Jessica, I believe, said about the First Amendment, that's our right for freedom of speech. We have the right to speak of what we want. And that would basically be breaking the Constitution. So, yeah.
So as a result, exercising the moderator's unbelievably great power to ask whenever he wants to ask a question. Do you think that means then that corporations do have the same First Amendment rights as individuals?
No, sir.
All right. So, some others here?
I'm currently attending St. Phillips College. St. Phillips College, and I wanted to go back to what Jessica and Mark were saying about an individual's rights versus a corporation's rights. Should they be viewed as an individual in the topic question? So my point on that, something to consider, is that if they are considered a person and has a person's rights, then what makes up their opinion, the corporation's opinion? A corporation is built on a lot of people, not just one person. So not everybody wants the same thing. And if they're, viewed, maybe not equal, as Mark said, but if they're viewed, it's a fine line between having the rights of a person and, what else could they do?
My name is Randy. I am a junior at East Central High School. And going back to the question, do corporations have the same First Amendment right to free speech as individual Americans? Yes, they have the same rights as individual Americans, but how they use their money and their power is not equal. They use their money to promote their ideas and different things like that, but us as the average Joe, we can't. We don't have that money to go out and do those commercials or promote those things the same way. But by limiting the money, it'll give us all an equal shot. They can speak and voice their opinions the same way we do and speak politically about things. There is something that I take to heart as being a big member of the FFA. In our creed, it says, playing square with others whose happiness depends upon me. How is that playing square when these billionaires can go out and do different things, but us as the average Joe can't?
So which tables yet haven't had a person speak? So.
Hi, my name is Jonna Pionzik. I'm a junior at East Central High School, and one thing we majorly talked about at our table was freedom of speech. What really is it defined as now today in America? Because like TJ Mays brought up, if I were to scream fire right now and everyone would be running out of the room, that's clear and present danger. And you can look back in our history, and there's cases where clear and present danger hinders freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is a finicky topic because even though it says that in our First Amendment, like Jessica says, it goes back and forth. And like in today's society, we are a social media society. Everyone in this room has read many things that are limited to 140 characters. And so that affects mass public opinion. So even though freedom of speech is there and you affect those opinions, an opinion may get out that is not the right thing to say. If you don't know all the facts, you can't make a clear argument about something. And that really affects what our politicians and politics are talking about now today. So even though these corporations are affecting these opinions and going on with all this stuff, the public opinion can be influenced as well by money. Political ads, campaign ads. Negative ads are very effective because of how much information it gives, rather than the good ads where a little kid runs up singing happy songs with bright colors. You're more likely to pay attention to those negative ads. So freedom of speech and what you say and how you say it plays a major role in this entire argument.
Well, it's almost time to wrap up, but how many of you are inclined to think that corporations do not have the same free speech rights as individuals? And how many of you are inclined to think that they do? And how many of you aren't sure? Okay. Who here belongs to a corporation? Is there anybody here who doesn't belong to a corporation? Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, lots of corporations. Any kind of club probably is incorporated in some way. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would just like, and these are the people who have most touched me and made Constitution Café far more than I had ever dreamed it could become, are Sheila Black, Patty Reyes, Roland Toscano, and Paul Martin, who's a member of our nonprofit group. Could you just stand and let us give you a hand? And now, real quickly, could you students stand and give yourselves a hand because you're amazing.